Microsoft has renamed this to Microsoft Entra ID. So now we refer it as Microsoft Entra ID. So if you hear anyone saying Microsoft Entra ID or Azure Active Directory, it is one and the same thing. They can also provide secure authentication and authorization access to enterprise applications. Administrator provides seamless experiences and self-service management capabilities for all the users. Adaptive access and governance are core elements to the role by troubleshooting, monitoring, and reporting for the identity and access environment. We can also identify and run projects to modernize identity solutions, to implement hybrid identity solutions, and to implement identity governance. So all these things identity and access administrator do in day-to-day life. Right? Now, what are the prerequisites for this particular course? So there are some basic prerequisites, right? So with this course, it provides knowledge and skills on identity management in the cloud using Azure Active Directory. A participant need to have an understanding on best practices and industry security concepts such as defense in depth, least access, role-based access control, shared responsibility model, and zero trust model. Even if in case you are not meeting the prerequisite, that is absolutely fine as well. Because in this particular course, we are going to start things from scratch. So anyone who knows or who meet the prerequisite will be an added advantage. Anyone who's not meeting it, we will start the course in such a manner that first we are trying to meet the prerequisites and then we will be jumping onto the topics of this particular course, right? So person should have some experience in Azure workloads, understanding of Azure, Azure AD and cloud computing concepts. Basic IT knowledge or experience working in an IT environment would be an added advantage. Understanding the difference between authentication and authorization would also be helpful. So that is all what we are going to. That is all like the prerequisites. So if in case you are meeting it, it's well. And if in case you're not meeting it, that's fine as well. As I mentioned, after doing this particular training, you can also appear for the certification. So when you'll be appearing for the certification, this is the percentage of questions you may see. So implementing an identity management solution, you may expect somewhere around 25 to 30% of the course content. Implementing an authentication and access management solution, 25 to 30%. Implementing access management for applications, 10 to 15%. Planning and implementing an identity governance strategy, 25 to 30%. So this is the percentage of questions you may see during the certification, right? And if in case you clear the certification, you achieve this one. You achieve this middle certification, that is Microsoft Certified Identity and Access Administrator Associate. So this is an intermediate level of certification that you achieve. This is the certificate that you will be achieving, right? After this, if you further want to do a deep dive into Azure, then maybe you can go with Azure Solution Architect Expert. This is AZ305, right? Then you will become Microsoft Certified Azure Solution Architect Expert. But in order to clear this, you need to clear this first, SC-300 certificate first, right? What all we are going to cover? See, usually it's a 32-hour course, and this is defined for 8 hours. But usually when we do trainings, it's weekends or weekday trainings. We'll be doing trainings for 2 to 3 hours a day. So right now they have defined this day one concepts as per 8 hours, but we will further break this day one into multiple days, right? We will be doing a 2 hour training every day or 3 hour training every day. So this is the content as per 8 hours, but we will further break it down into 2 hours. So this is what we are going to cover in this particular course. So we'll be talking about how can we set up Azure AD, how can we set up identities. We will be doing some labs, external identities, hybrid identities. Again, we'll be doing some labs, multi-factor authentication, user authentication, conditional access, identity protection, planning for single sign-on, implementing single sign-on, application registrations, right? Entitlement management, access reviews, PIM, monitoring Azure AD. So this is what all we are going to cover in this particular course. So as of now, they have mentioned as per 8 hours every day for 4 hours, 4 days, but we will break it down probably into 10 to 15 days, right? That is how we are going to cover things. Okay. So this is how, or this is what we are going to cover in this particular course. Now let me give you a brief demonstration that how actual training is going to be, how actually we are going to cover things during the technical discussion. So maybe for 10-15 minutes, I'll give you a brief demonstration. Maybe I'll pick up one topic and I'll try to give a brief demonstration on that particular topic. Right? Team, am I audible? Am I audible clearly to all of you? Guys, am I audible clearly to all of you? All right, sounds good. All right. So now let me give you a brief demonstration on one particular topic. See, guys, first of all, what is identity? Right? As I mentioned, nowadays, whenever any person joins any organization, the first thing organization try to do is it try to give an identity to that particular person. Right? When cloud was not there in picture, how we were creating identities? We were creating identities with the help of on-premises setup, right? When cloud was not there in the picture, how we were creating identities? We were creating identities in the on-premises. In short, right? In short, we can call this as on-prem as well. On-prem is nothing but the data center environment where organizations have set up their own data centers, right? So how do we create identities in on-premises? In on-premises, we have something called as Windows Server Active Directory. That is how traditionally we were creating the identities. So using this Windows Server Active Directory, we were creating the identities in the on-premises, right? Sometimes people also call this as directory services. In short, people also call this as AD. Sometimes people call this as Windows Server AD. It is one and the same thing, right? This is synonyms. Now, question comes: how do we get this Windows Server AD, right? How do we get this Windows Server AD in on-premises? In the enterprise world, we have two types of operating system, right? In the enterprise world, we have two types of operating system. So one is we have, right? So one is we have Windows operating system, and one is we have Linux operating system. If we further talk about the Windows operating system, there are two types of Windows operating system. One is what we called as client operating system, and one is what we called as server operating system, right? So the examples of client operating systems and server operating systems are, see, client operating system is Windows 7, Windows 8, right? So Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, Windows 11. These are all examples of client operating systems. Similarly, we have server operating systems like Windows Server 2019, Windows Server 2022, Windows Server 2016. So these are all examples of server operating systems, right? Now, if we want to get Active Directory, we can achieve Active Directory with the help of server operating system. We cannot achieve Active Directory with the help of client operating system. It can only be achieved with the help of server OS, right? So let's say we can have a machine. It could be a physical machine. It could be a virtual machine, right? So we may have a machine. It could be a physical. It could be a virtual machine. In this machine, we need to get a server operating system. Right, so basically we need to have a virtual machine. It could be a physical machine or it could be a virtual server. In this machine we need to deploy server operating system. So let's say we deploy Windows Server 2019. When we deploy Windows Server 2019, when we deploy a server operating system, in this server operating system we have something called as server manager, right? So we have something called as server manager. As the name suggests, with the help of server manager, we can manage the entire server. Entire server can be managed with the help of the server manager. When we go to the server manager, here we will get something called as add roles and features. Now, depending upon what role we are going to add in this server, accordingly the server would be able to behave. For example, if we want to make this server as web server, we can add the web server role. If we want to make this machine as DNS server, we can add the DNS role. Right? Similarly, if we would like to get Active Directory, we need to add this ADDS role. This role we need to add. So ADDS stands for Active Directory Domain Service role. This role we need to add, right? So we need to add this ADDS role. So once we add this ADDS role, then we get an option to promote the server to a domain controller. We get an option to promote the server to a DC. Domain controllers are very powerful machines. So let's say if we have a big environment where we have thousands of users, thousands of devices, we can manage thousands of users, thousands of devices with the help of few domain controllers. They can be managed, right? So we can promote the server to a domain controller. When we will be promoting the server to a domain controller, we will get three options. Are we adding a new forest? Are we adding a domain into an existing forest? Or are we adding a domain controller into an existing domain? Right? So are we adding a new forest or domain into an existing forest or domain controller into an existing domain? If we are doing this activity for the very first time, we will say that we are adding a new forest. So first of all, we have to add a new forest. So when we say that we are adding a new forest, it says, hey, what is your forest root domain name? Root domain name is the first domain of this forest. So whatever the first domain is, it could be abc.com, local.com, infotech.com, jitin.com, google.com, microsoft.com, whatever the domain we are using, right? So let's say my domain is jitin.com. This is the first domain of the forest, jitin.com, right? So what will happen now? Once all this is done, this VM number one will be rebooted, and after this reboot, VM number one will be acting like a domain controller, right? So VM1 becomes a domain controller. And earlier, prior to the reboot, VM number one was in a workgroup environment. But after reboot, this VM number one will now be in a domain environment. And this becomes the fully qualified domain name, vm1.jitin.com. This becomes the FQDN, fully qualified domain name of this machine. So now this machine is acting like a domain controller. So we can go to server manager, right? Again, we can go to server manager. In server manager, we can go to tools. We can go to Active Directory users and computers, and we can create the on-prem users. So on-premises users can be created. User number one at jitin.com, user number two at jitin.com. So that is how we would be able to create the on-premises users. That is how on-premises users can be created, right? And where all this information is stored. So we have something called as Active Directory database, and this is the location to this database. See Windows. Under Windows, there will be a folder with the name NTDS. Under NTDS, there will be a file with the name ntds.dit. So this is our Active Directory database file. This is the place where all the information is stored. All the users, their passwords, their first name, last name, everything, all the information is stored in this Active Directory database, right? This database has further got four logical partitions. It has got schema partition, configuration partition, application partition, and domain partition, right? But we are not doing a deep dive into the on-premises directory. So this is the Active Directory database that we have got. Now let me give you some information regarding this forest, right? See guys. So anyone who's new to this, see how this forest domain controller come. Let's say Google is the first organization, or Google is the organization who's starting their business. So what is the first thing Google will be needing? So Google will be needing a forest. Let's say their forest is google.com, right? What is the benefit of this forest? Forest basically provide us an isolation boundary. Means whatever Google will be deploying inside this forest, anyone outside the forest would not be able to access anything which is present inside the forest. Whatever database, applications, identities, whatever Google will be creating inside this forest, they will basically get an isolation boundary, right? Any person outside the forest would not be able to access it. Okay, all right, right. Now, what Google will do when they have got a forest, now they will be getting their first domain. So let's say their first domain is, we call it as forest root domain, right? Sometimes people call this as primary domain, but the precise name is forest root domain. Who is the first domain of this forest? Same as our forest, that is google.com. So google.com is the first domain of this forest, right? Now within this forest, we have got a root domain. Within this domain, now Google will add some machines, DC1 and DC2. DC1 and DC2 are nothing but the machines. They could be physical machines, it could be virtual machines, which they have promoted as a domain controller. And why they have to promote them as a domain controller? Because now let's say if Google has set up their domain, now they will be hiring people. Let's say if they are hiring me today. So what is the first thing they have to do? They have to provide me an identity. So Jitin at google.com, how they will provide me an identity? They need to have a domain controller. So this DC1 and DC2 is nothing but the machines that Google has promoted them to a domain controllers. Why we have multiple domain controllers? For the high availability. On a given day, if DC1 is down, DC2 would be able to do the job, would be able to do the authentication, authorization, and so on. Right? Now let's say after 6 months, Google is moving into one more line of industry, right? So within the same forest, they may create one more domain. So let's say today they decided that they will be going into this email industry. So they have got one more domain, that is gmail.com. For gmail.com as well, they will be hiring people. So again, they need to have some domain controllers. So let's say they have got two domain controllers. Now let's say after 1 year, they are moving into one more line of industry. So now let's say they are moving into audios and videos. So they may have one more domain, let's say youtube.com. For that as well, they need to have a domain controller. And then there is a concept of child domain. So you can easily identify it's a child domain, because whenever we have a child domain, parent domain name will always come. So let's say this is our child domain, maybe us.youtube.com. So in child domain, parent domain name will always be there. So youtube.com is a parent domain and us.youtube.com is a child domain. So for this as well, we can have a domain controller. So that is how we can have the domain controller. So guys, can you please tell me how many forests do we have in this diagram? How many forests do we have in this diagram? Right? We just have one forest, absolutely correct. How many domains we have in this diagram? We have one forest. How many domains we have in this diagram? Okay. Basically, we have four domains. Google.com is one domain, Gmail.com is second domain, YouTube.com is third domain, and us.youtube.com is also a domain. Although it's a child domain, but that's a separate domain too. So we have four domains, right? How many domain controllers we have in this diagram? How many domain controllers do we have in this diagram? So basically we have six domain controllers in this diagram. Absolutely correct. So in total we have got single controller, single stack, right? That is how basically we can get the forest, root, and root domain. That is how we basically create identities in the on-premises, right? Okay. Guys, anyone has any questions, any queries so far regarding this technical discussion? Anyone has? See, you may have some other queries, right? But any questions regarding these topics that we have discussed so far? Okay, so looks good. We do not have any questions as of now. Let me give you a brief introduction. Can we have multiple forests? Absolutely. You may have multiple forests. If in case we need multiple forests, then we can set up multiple forests, right? But usually you will find out organizations have a single forest. Within the single forest, they may have multiple domains. But if in case you need to have multiple forests, then we can have multiple forests. Now, what is the difference between domain controller and domain? See, Ravi, domain is like a logical component. Jitin.com, Facebook.com, it's like a logical entity. Domain controller is a machine. Domain controller, see, in one domain, we can have multiple domain controllers. So, domain is like a logical entity. Domain controller is like a physical entity. It's a virtual machine or it's a server on which we have added a specific role. And on that machine, which has now become the domain controller, we can create the identities. So it's like a machine on which a special role has been assigned, right? Think it like this. Hospital, what is hospital? Hospital is like a logical thing, right? Hospital is basically a place where patients can get the treatment. So in one hospital, we can have multiple doctors, right? We may have multiple doctors. So any person, let's say I'm a person, but in order for me to become a doctor, what I have to do, I have to study medicine for 5 years. So similarly, in order for a machine to become a domain controller, we have to meet a prerequisite. What is the prerequisite? We have to add the ADDS role, and then we have to promote the server to a domain controller, right? So we can turn a person into a doctor after a specific study. Similarly, we can turn a machine into a domain controller, but we have to meet some prerequisites. Hope you got the clarity. Shiva, I'm not sure which example you're asking for. So maybe you can just raise your hand. I can unmute you. Then you can put the question across. But Ravi, hope you got the clarity, the difference between domain controller and domain. Okay, sounds good, right? Now let me just give a brief introduction about the cloud identity, right? So this is how we create identities in the on-premises. So let's have a look. How do we create identities in cloud? So in cloud, we have a service called as Azure Active Directory. That's a service. In short, people also call this as Azure AD. In short, people call this as AAD. Now the name has been renamed to Microsoft Entra ID. Right? So now it has been renamed to Microsoft Entra ID. So if you hear someone saying Azure AD or Azure Active Directory, Microsoft Entra ID, one and the same thing. Right? How do we get this? We all know, in order to create a user, what do we need? We need a username at domain name. A domain is required. Without having a domain, can we create the identity? Not possible, right? Jitin at facebook.com. Facebook.com is a domain, so we need to have a domain. Now, how do we get domain in cloud? So how do we start the journey in Azure? See, whenever we are going with Azure, think it like this, guys. Let's say I want to send an email to my friend. And while sending an email to my friend, I would like to use Gmail services. So what is the first thing I need? I need a Gmail account, right? Let's say jitin at gmail.com is my account. Now I can go to Gmail portal. I can go to www.gmail.com. I can log in there and then I can send an email to my friend. So if I want to use Gmail services, I will be needing a Gmail account. Similarly, if I would like to use Azure services, right, I will be needing an Azure account. It could be my personal account, jitin at outlook.com. or let's think it like this. Let's say jitin.singh@outlook.com is my account, or it could be my corporate account. I'll give you examples with both. Right? Let's say this is my personal account. Traditionally, what was happening, traditionally when we were creating the account, Microsoft was providing us two things. Microsoft was providing us default directory, and Microsoft was also providing us a domain, because without a domain we would not be able to create the identities. So how we were getting this domain? From this Azure account, Microsoft will remove these special characters. So what are the special characters? Dot, at. Again, this .com is also a special character, but it do not touches .com, because .com is a top level domain. .com, .co.in, .r, .org, right? So these are all top level domains. So what will be my domain? It will remove the special characters from this Azure account. So Jitin dot will be removed, sync at will be removed, Outlook, and it always provide us a domain at .onmicrosoft.com. So this becomes our domain, right? So now we have got the domain. Can we create the cloud users or Azure AD users or Microsoft Entra ID users? So now we have got the domain. Now we can create the users. So how can we do this? Maybe we can say test at username at domain name, or let's say test123 at domain name. So that is how we would be able to create the identities in cloud. Right? Let's take one more example. This time maybe with the corporate email ID. So let's say my Azure account is jitin@facebook.com. This is my Azure account. So what Microsoft will be doing? Microsoft will be providing us two things: default directory, and will be providing us a domain. So what will be the domain? It will remove the special characters, right? So Jitin at will be removed, facebook.onmicrosoft.com, right? So this becomes our domain. So now we have got the domain. Can we create the cloud users? Yes, we can create the cloud user. Maybe let's say user number one at so and so, user number two at so and so. So that is how we would be able to create the users in cloud. Right? That is how we get a directory, and that is how we get the users in cloud. So that is how we can do things in cloud as well. Right? See guys, reason of doing this small demonstration is just wanted to give you an idea that how our actual training is going to be. So in actual training, this is how we will be discussing things. This is how I will be explaining things to all of you. And let's say while I'm explaining any technical question, if in case you have any queries, anything that you want to ask, feel free to ask. So there you can just unmute yourself and you can ask anything, like whatever comes to your mind regarding the technical discussion, you can ask that particular question as well. Right? So just wanted to give you a brief demonstration, right? Just wanted to give you a brief demonstration like how training is going to be. So now guys, I'm just opening questions and the answers round for you people, right? So if in case any one of you has any questions, any queries regarding this particular training, please feel free to ask, right? Okay, guys, I apologize for the inconvenience caused. I think I got disconnected, right? Not sure, like, I think I just got dropped off. So let me, as I mentioned, are we now creating users and devices into AD? So will not manage the user on which. Uh, Let me just unmute you, Pushkar Sharma. Let me just unmute you. Please go with your question. Pushkar, please go with your.
Hi, Jitin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
actually, I was asking that we are now creating the users into the AAD, Azure Active Directory, and
Mm-hmm.
the users are already created on the on-prem AD, which are not synced to uh, Azure AD. So, does it not manage through IAM?
See, what we have to do, whatever users we are creating in on-premises, if in
Mhm.
case we want to synchronize those users to cloud, we can do that.
Okay.
But then we have to use a tool. We call them as hybrid identities. Then we use a tool called as Azure AD Connect tool. Now it is called as Microsoft Entra AD Connect. By default, the users are not synced. We have
Okay.
to do this process. So there is a process of creating the hybrid identities, and with the help of Azure AD Connect tool, it can be done. Right? Let's say you have
Okay.
5,000 users in on-premises. Now maybe you have a requirement, you only want to sync 500 users to cloud. We can do that as well. So we have n number of users. To those n number of users, if we only want to sync some users, that is also we can do. Hope you got the clarity to
Okay.
your question.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. So, guys, opening this questions and answers round for you as well. Anyone who has any questions, any queries, please feel free to ask. I have also shared the contact detail of the person on this on my screen. So Amit is the right guy who would be able to help you with the enrollment process for this particular training. So his phone number is mentioned over here, right? So you can just take a picture or you can just pin down his number and you may reach out to him for any enrollment process. So team, any questions? Anyone has any questions, any queries, anything? Yeah, Shiva, let me just unmute you or request you to please go ahead with your question. Just give me a minute. So I have unmuted you. Please go ahead. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes, Jitin. Uh, Last part you said, right? It will remove the dot and underscore about the domain.
Right.
Yeah. Can you
This
please
for your
explain one more
reference.
time? Actually, I created my own personal Office 365 domain. So I'm not seeing this behavior. Can you please explain one more time?
Which domain you have created?
I created an Azure, I mean Office 365 subscription
Okay.
I taken.
Mm-hmm.
So in that, I see um, I see my name at the rate my domain name dot on Microsoft.com. I'm seeing.
See, so basically, what would have happened when you will be going with the Office 365 account or Office 365 license, you
Mhm,
could have used like this. Maybe let's say jitin.singh at jitin.onmicrosoft.com, whatever you wish to use. Means
mhm, mhm,
this part is something that you can decide on your own. This part, and it will be coming dot on Microsoft.com. This
mhm.
is this will be happening when you will be creating an account with so and so, assuming you do not have any account. See, there are two things. First, when you are signing up for Office 365 or when you are signing up for Azure, you would like to use your account. This is your account, or this
Correct.
could be your account. You are using that account. If you go with this method, then you will get a domain like this. This is how you will get a domain. Second is, let's say I am saying I do not have any email ID while I'm getting for an Azure account or while I'm getting for an Office 365. So then it give you an option. You can write your own email ID. So this part you can write whatever you want. You can write, but this part will be given to us by Microsoft. This
Mhm.
account will be given to us by Microsoft. So these are two options. Mostly people go with this option. Mostly, I'm not saying
Yes, yes.
always, but mostly people go with this option, right?
Yeah.
Now, one more thing you can do on top of it. See, usually this is how we do not want to create the users. So let's say if I am the first person in Facebook, who is onboarding Azure, and let's say I have used this account jitin@facebook.com. This is my domain. Let's say now we are hiring so many other people. We don't want to create users like this. Maybe we would like to create users like this. Maybe let's say user number 3 at facebook.com or
Yeah.
user number 4 at facebook.com. So we can do this as well. How this can be achieved? In Microsoft Entra ID, there is a feature called as custom domain names. So we have to go to that feature, we have to go to custom domain names, and we have to add a custom domain name over there. So which domain name we will be adding? We will be adding facebook.com as a domain. And then we have to verify that domain. Then we can even create users on this domain like this, user 3 at facebook.com and user 4 at facebook.com. That can also be
Okay.
done with the help of custom domain names.
Okay.
Hope you
Thank
got
you,
that
Jitin.
clarity, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Jitin.
Raghav, I just showed you the modules over here. So I just showed modules couple of minutes back. Yeah, Raghav, let me just unmute you. Yeah, Raghav, please go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I. So, so you said you have already shared the modules, is it? Yeah, I can even look up in the Google. This actually it covers most of the topic like conditional access policy and everything. For is there any like small projects kind of thing in SC-300 to be done for any kind of certification or so?
There are so many labs that we will be doing, so you can
Okay.
treat them as small projects or you can think of them as labs. So that is
Okay.
something we will be doing in this SC-300. There are good number of labs that we will be doing.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And so, how many days so it will be taken on the weekend, so it will be taken every day. So in how many days it will be this will be done?
So usually this course will take somewhere around 24 hours. So if we will be doing it on weekend, and let's say every weekend we'll be spending 2 to 3 hours, then it can take
Uh-huh.
n number of days. Like for example, let's say we are meeting for 2 hours every day, then we will be needing 12 sessions, right?
Okay.
If we will be meeting for 3 hours every day, then we will be needing 8 sessions. So it will be around 24 hours. Let's say we are doing this parallelly, means we are doing this on weekends as well as on weekdays. So in weekdays, if we are doing it for again, let's say for 2 hours every day, again we'll be needing 12 sessions. So we will be opting for, like we will be opening the trainings on both on weekdays as well as on weekends. So depending
Okay.
upon your schedule, depending upon your availability, you can enroll for the right course, means weekend or weekdays depending upon your availability.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
This is the course outline if in case you want to go through it again. So I'll share this PDF with Amit. He'll share it to all of you. So this is the course content, right? This is a course outline. This is all what we will be
Okay.
covering. So module 1, implementing identity management solution. Module 2,
Okay.
right, implementing authentication and access solution,
Okay.
right? Then we have module
What do
3,
you
implementing
implement that?
access management for apps. Then we have module 4, planning and managing identity governance strategy, right? This is how we'll be covering things.
So
So we'll
it
share
would be
this
for
PDF to
totally
all of
four
you.
modules, right? So in total there would be four modules.
Yeah, yeah, number of modules are 4, but if you have a look at every module has got so many subtopics.
Right. Right. Right.
For
Right. Yeah.
example,
Right.
these are all the subtopics that we'll be covering.
Yeah. I got it. Got it.
It still belongs to module 1. Right? So there are so many topics to be covered in module 1.
All right, Jilini, I got it. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Anyone else team has any questions, any queries? Okay, so guys, please pen down the name of the gentleman who would be able to help you with the enrollment process. So Amit is the name of the guy. I have shared his number over here, right? So let me share this number on chat as well. So I'm just sharing his number on the chat window as well. So anyone who would like to enroll, just can talk with this person. He's the right guy to help you with the enrollment process. So team, if you have any questions, see, Nomen AZ500 has a different topics altogether. AZ-500 talks about the Azure security. It talks about networking, network security, identity security, container security, Kubernetes security, right? Application security. So basically, AZ-500 talks about the Azure security. AZ-300 talks about the identity and access management. So these are two different courses completely, right? Hope that answers your query, Norman. Thank you. So guys, as we do not have any further questions, so would like to thank you all, and we can wind up here. So thank you all for giving your valuable time. It was really nice interacting with all of you. Right. So for the enrollment, you can just reach out to this guy. I've already shared his number on PowerPoint as well as via chat as well. If you have any questions, any queries, you can connect with Amit, and maybe he can connect you with the right person, right? So would like to thank you all for giving your valuable time. It was really nice interacting with all of you. Would have a good weekend ahead and look forward to see you on the training days. Thank you, team. I'm stopping the screen sharing. I'll be stopping this recording and will be stopping the or will be just closing this call as well, right? So again, would like to thank you all. Have a good rest of the day. Take